Matt Bauersachs joins us from Learn to Live Recovery. He talks about enjoying substances as an adolescent, dealing with falling out from sports and college, the ups and downs of depression, the value of structured sober living, and going through the challenges of starting a recovery center from scratch. Enjoy. Welcome to the Illuminate Recovery podcast. We shed light on mental health issues, mental illness, and addiction recovery. Ways to cope, manage, and inspire. Beyond the self-care we will discuss, you may need the help of a licensed professional. My name is Kurt Neider. I'm a husband, a father, entrepreneur, a handyman, and a student of life. I avoid conflict, I deflect with humor, and I'm fascinated by the human experience.
And I'm Shelley Mangum. I am a clinical mental health counselor, and my favorite role of all times is grandma. I am a seeker of truth, and I feel like life should be approached with tremendous curiosity.
I ask the dumb questions.
I fill in the gaps.
The Illuminate Recovery podcast is brought to you by Illuminate Billing Advocates. Make billing and collection simple with a leader in substance abuse and mental health billing services. Verification and analysis of benefits, pre-authorizations, utilization management, accurate claim submission and management, denial and appeal management, and industry-leading reporting. Improve your practice's cash flow and your ability to help your clients with Illuminate Billing Advocates.
Today, Kurt and I have the opportunity and privilege of talking with Matt Bauersachs. Matt is an MSW. He is the founder and director of operations at Learn to Live Recovery. Matt is dedicated to recovery and helping others who are looking for lasting recovery as well. Matt has a master's degree in social work, and he has been in the industry for several years and incredibly active. Matt, thanks for being on with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's kind of fun. You've got a lot of stuff going on. Maybe let's just start at the beginning and how you ended up here, because I'm pretty sure, like most of our guests, you did not dream about being in recovery when you were a kid.
No, I did not. My story starts from a lot of uncomfortable moments. I started to use really early in life. I just never really, like a lot of people in 12-step meetings, they'll say I just never really had my place in the world. And, I started to drink at a young age, about 12. And then after that, I found the use of, marijuana. And then, for me, I was never a great student. I have ADHD, and so the teachers didn't really like me either because I could never focus. I could never sit still. And, school never came easy for me. I was a pretty social kid. I was a pretty active kid. I played a lot of sports. That's kind of where, I connected in sports and I enjoyed that. But the other piece, I just kind of felt less than. And so as I moved through kind of my middle school years, I found that there was a group of people that were, smoking weed and experimenting with things. And, it looked like fun. So I tried it. And I'm very much one of those people that believes I was kind of born an addict or an alcoholic. I knew once I touched it that it was never going to be a one-time thing. I loved the feeling that it gave me. All of my anxieties, all of my worries kind of went away, and that's what I loved about it. For me, I had a lot of self-image issues as well as a kid, really those were just kind of kept to me. I never really kind of let those out to the world, but that just kind of begins my push down process, as I call it. Kind of as I move into my high school years, high school was kind of a difficult time for me because then my high school was very competitive with academics and sports, and it's a very well funded high school in Richmond, Virginia. And, like I said, I wasn't that good at school. It never came naturally to me. And so I began to, use drinking and drugs as a way to deal with school. So I would use before school. I would leave in the middle of school and come back sometimes. I would not be at school a lot. At this time, I knew that I had the ability to be a really good tennis player. I played a lot of sports as a kid, but that one was the one that stuck with me the most. I probably had enough talent to play Division I at that level. My team was constantly, in state championship contention. There was a couple, 2 or 3 D1 athletes that played on that team, and I made varsity as a freshman. I got held back in 2nd grade or something, so I was like a year older than most of my peers, right? So I got my license early. So I got a car and I got a license in freshman year, and I had this car. It made me cool, and it was just kind of one of those things that kind of set me apart. And I had a job where I was making money to kind of fund the beginning of my habit. And one day, for whatever reason, this one guy asked me if I wanted to go to this place and race him. I was like, okay, maybe whatever. Sure. I didn't really like the guy, so I really just kind of wanted to shut him up. And we went to like this, it was like an abandoned development for houses that they hadn't started building yet, but it was just a long, straight 2-lane road. And I had kind of used like an hour before that. And so we go and we do it a couple times, and I beat him and he beats me, and then we decide to go one more time. And there's a little curve in the road, and he kind of came into my lane a little bit, and I lost control of my car. I flipped it over a median, and it landed on the lid. It hit 2 landscaping trees or whatever, which I found out later were very expensive. But yeah, I still don't remember how I got out of the car. The car was smashed all around me. Like, if I wasn't in the driver's seat, if anyone was with me, they would be dead. The ambulance shows up, the fire truck shows up, and they're just shocked that I'm alive. And they're like, wow, you should not be here. And at the time, my parents show up, my mom's in tears, my dad can't look at me because he's like, I just don't know. Lucky enough, because my car was not in very good shape, and I was just kind of scared straight that I didn't get a breathalyzer. They didn't search my vehicle. And I basically got out of that with just a few bumps and bruises and no legal issues. That should have been my wake-up call, right? 16, I was just getting into it. Shortly after that, I got diagnosed with lupus, which is very rare for a teenage boy. It's very popular. I would say, I'm not popular, is probably not the right word, but it's prevalent among like middle-aged women. I got it from a acne drug that I was taking called minocycline, and it's a very painful autoimmune disease. It attacks your joints. And me as an athlete, not being able to do what my only outlet was, I think brought me closer to my bottom. I wasn't taking very many like painkillers at that point, but I was definitely using weed and anything I could get my hands on to deal with the pain. I wasn't playing to the level that I wanted to play, and so I just kind of stopped trying. And basically from sophomore year to senior year, it was just kind of painful. I would play, and I could play better than most, but I just was constantly in a state of depression. At this point, it became clear to my parents that I had a substance abuse issue. They sent me to therapists, outpatients. I would always find a way for, an excuse to quit those programs. And as an adolescent, if you've ever worked with adolescents, it's extremely difficult. And I did, which was my karma later in my career. But I basically was able to kind of get along and fly under the radar until my senior year. We got to the state tournament, and I had played the day before. I knew I wasn't going to play the next day, so me and a couple other seniors got a few of our party supplies, and we were just going to drink and hang out, and because we weren't going to have to play the next day. And it kind of escalated to the point where the coach became suspicious of what we were doing. There was people in and out of our room and noise or whatever, and we ended up getting caught. Me and two other seniors were in the paper. Obviously, we weren't allowed to play, and I was suspended for the rest of the year, so I didn't get to walk at graduation. At the time, I thought, it can't get any lower than this. This is horrible. I escalated my use to cocaine, prescription painkillers, Xanax, anything I could get my hands on, really. And somehow I got into a college. I don't know how. And, that summer was just filled with just using anything I could get my hands on. And my parents were like, well, hopefully college he'll figure it out. Right. And of course I went, and my dad calls it a $25,000 seminar because he says John Belushi's grade point average 0.0. I had a lot of fun, so to speak, but I should have died so many times. There were times where I ended up just kind of like shirt off, shoes off, lost my keys, and I would end up somewhere on campus, just blacked out from the night before. I woke up in the morning, stumbled back to my room, alcohol poisonings, overdoses, and obviously I got kicked out. For me, that was an extremely low point as well. I came home and just was depressed. I was working back at the golf course that I worked at in high school. And, I wasn't good at school, so, I was like at community college and just couldn't get it together. Obviously I told you my use had escalated. I was using cocaine almost daily, and I was using Xanax to come down. And so it's a pretty expensive habit. I began drug dealing. I dabbled in like selling weed in high school and stuff like that, but it was never something I had to do. And the stakes change when you move from weed to a harder drug. It goes from, misdemeanor possession to felony. And so the people I was spending time with were not your best characters. I played the part well. I wear the golf shirt, and I live in a suburban area, and the suburban white kid, and that was, my double life. That was the beginning of my double life. And after a while, I was using more than I was selling. I was into these people for a lot of money. And, my family has this get together. My family's kind of spread out throughout the country. And after Christmas, before New Year's, that weekend between Christmas and New Year's, we have a family get together. And I couldn't go a couple of days without using. Everybody else drank, so it really wasn't an issue for me to drink, but it wasn't an option for me. So I got what I needed, and I took it to this family get together, and everybody was drinking and enjoying it. And I would go to the bathroom and do lines. And then one time I was careless and forgot to lock the door. And somebody came in and saw me. And that was probably the beginning of the end for me. I know now that my mom had already been searching for treatment programs and things like that. Found out that I wasn't welcome back at Hampton-Sydney College, which is where I went for that semester. I come back home, and I get in another car accident. This time I was impaired as well. I rear-ended some guy and, totaled the car that I had. And lucky enough again, because I looked the way I look, and I was scared straight that they didn't search my vehicle. They didn't give me a breathalyzer. And then, I just went and toiled in my issues and was ready to die. I barely left my house. All I was doing was using alone. All my friends had alienated me. I owed people money. I had no place to go. My mom sat me down one day and asked me if I would go to treatment. But she didn't more than ask me. She said, "You're out if you don't go." And so at that point, I was doing it for her, but I was so sick and tired of my life and being unhappy that I decided to go. I went to treatment in Connecticut at a place called Mountainside, and it was in the middle of nowhere because my parents didn't want me to catch a ride back to Richmond or run. And right across the street there was a horse farm, and there was a mountain behind it, hence the name, and it was just in the middle of nowhere. I couldn't go anywhere. Not to mention there was like 2 feet of snow on the ground because it was January. I went to treatment January 3rd, 2011, and I was in there a few weeks, and, like most people do in treatment, I was twirling my cigarette in the back of the room and waiting for the meeting to be over so I could go outside and smoke. And I heard a speaker that night that stuck with me ever since. He said, "Raise your hand if you're in the lodge." They called it the lodge. We raised our hands, and there was about 25 of us. And he was like, "About 25 of you? Okay." He was like, "Maybe one of you will be sober in a year, and more than that will be dead." And I was like, whoa, you never think that this thing is going to kill you, even though it's killed so many other people. I should be dead just from the reckless, driving that I was doing before, right? I gotten out of so many things in my life and had so many second chances. I was like, whoa. And it didn't even really hit me until a couple of days later. We were discussing it in a group, and I was like, man, maybe I'll give this a shot. Everybody in here is happy. They're smiling. They're getting their coins. They're hugging. I want to be happy. And so I did my time in inpatient, decided to stay up there for this other program called the Phase 4 program, which is structured sober living. Basically, you help work for them, and you stay there a few extra months. I had every intention of going home after that. But after the 3 months, my life was looking up. I had a car. I was feeling good. I was happy. And so I stayed in a sober living just down the street from there. Got another job. Made a lot of friends. And it was very much a similar platform to what Learn to Live Recovery is now. And for me, that was my change. Even to that point, I had thoughts of going back home, just drinking, or going on the marijuana maintenance program because I don't need the harder stuff. But that wasn't an option for me, because whatever I touched, I just couldn't have just one of anything. Still can't. Buy ice cream, chips, whatever you want to talk about. But during my time there, I learned how to have fun in recovery. I learned that I could have a great life, and I could be happy, and that I could be somewhat successful in life. And so, one day I was working at this fire, water, and mold restoration company, and I was underneath in a crawl space of a flooded building pulling out wet insulation. And I got home that day, and I was like, I think I want to go back to school. And I was from the St. Louis area originally before we moved to Richmond, Virginia. And my parents said that, they would help me go somewhere, but I couldn't go home. And for me, going home wasn't an option. There was people looking for me. So I was like, all right, I'll move to St. Louis. I'll go back to school. And, there was ups and downs, and I was still figuring out the school thing. I wasn't good at it. I didn't know how to learn. I didn't know what to do. I was trying to be a business guy, but that wasn't my strength. So I took a social work class, and I got an A in it. The first time I got an A in anything since middle school, probably. And it was a win. I was like, okay, I'll do this. And I obviously had a large pit to dig out of because of the grade point average I had at my first try at college. So I spent some time in community college, ended up transferring to SIUE. I met my now wife at college, and I passed, and I graduated with honors. And I was the president of our Student Social Workers Association, and I led events, and I spoke, and I advocated, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I got a internship at a local outpatient treatment center working with adolescent kids. It started out as me just coming and talking to the kids, and I was hanging out. I ended up staying there for my bachelor's practicum. I enjoyed working there. I enjoyed working with the kids. Still worked there when I went through my master's program, which I thought would never happen. Graduated with honors from there too in December. And for me, I loved giving away what was freely given to me. This recovery life that I live now is beyond my wildest dreams. And now, I have a beautiful wife. I have a daughter on the way, and coming in October, we've been able to together be house parents in this program called Joe's Place, where we housed homeless boys, and we got to show them, what a family was like. It was a powerful thing we did for a couple of years, and I ended up getting furloughed from my job at the treatment center, and it was a dream of mine to give to people here what I got in Connecticut. And so during a pandemic, I decided to start a business. And I wrote the business plan. I did the pitches. I'm lucky enough to have enough family support to help me make this thing a reality. And I did that. And we opened it on my 10-year anniversary, 10-year sobriety anniversary this year in January. And so I guess that's where I am now.
What a cool story. Very cool story.
What does that structure look like? You mentioned that it wasn't available in Missouri. You saw it in Connecticut. What does that look like? How's it different in your mind?
So there's a lot of what I would call sober rentals, right? Sober living's Oxford houses. They're all over the country. You pay a certain amount and you have a place to stay and some accountability and a house meeting probably in a week. But what I had was full wraparound, services, programming, activities, everything in one place. We were regularly drug tested, so I had a lot of accountability. We also did fun things like go on rafting trips and play paintball, and go to the gym. And on 4th of July, we blew up a bunch of fireworks. And, but the main thing was that every day I had a structure from the time I woke up to the time I went to sleep. There was things I was doing all day long, and eventually it was to the point where I was going to work. But for me, I needed that structure in my life in that first year of sobriety. I needed to see that I could do it and that I could be successful. We had groups. I had individual sessions. I learned how to cook. I learned how to budget. I learned how to not spend all my money on shoes and sports gambling. I didn't know what to do. All I was eating was frozen pizzas and ice cream. I didn't know how to live life. And it showed me that. And it showed me that I could be successful and that I could live a lifestyle of recovery. And for me, that first year, it was imperative that I had that. And came back to St. Louis. I lived here for like 6 or 7 years. And so I knew what was available. I knew what was here. And, you know, even though we have some good treatment centers here, we have some great 12-step here, there just wasn't this. And the other factor was I wanted it, you know, just like mine was, close enough where somebody could visit, but far enough away where I could start a whole new life in here without having the issues of being in where I used. And so that's why I chose Herman, Missouri. I found a facility, and it's about an hour from St. Louis, if you're not familiar. Close enough where parents can visit, far enough away where we can help these kids rebuild their lives.
So have you kept that structure? Do you still kind of intentionally structure your day every day to help? Is that one of your dailies?
Oh, yeah. So my maintenance requires me to intentionally go about my life. Intention is huge for me. I get up, I work out, you know, I have my quiet time. Meditation is huge. You know, I go to work now and I come home and you know, I have this schedule to where I can always kind of reset and fall back into the schedule. Whenever I feel off, whenever I feel down, it helps me. And not only does it help me accomplish way more than I ever thought I would accomplish. I already talked about it before. I never thought I would graduate from college. Never thought I would live till 30. But it's something I still do. And I preach to these guys, all the things that I have them do, the meditation, the yoga, all the different mindfulness techniques, all the different self-help structures that I use and teach in my groups, I do it too. It's huge for me.
So Matt, you talked about your family a little bit, not necessarily growing up, but it sounded like you had a pretty darn supportive family and they were there for you. But even that, you know, that wasn't necessarily your driver, but it wasn't a resilience piece either, I guess. Or maybe it is now, but maybe it wasn't then.
Yeah, you know, my family, you know, even though we were at odds, they were still willing to help me at the time, right? You know, me and my mom and me and my dad, we had our issues, and it got me into treatment, and that's what I needed. I just needed to get there and find the reason why I wanted to stay. And, you know, my relationship with them now is just crazy different. Like, my dad is a key investor in Learn to Live and in me, and there's trust there that there never was before. And, you know, that is one of the things that recovery can give you back. It can give you all those people back, especially your family. And for me, I felt so much shame for all the things I did, all the stuff I put them through. Like, when I was going through the amends process, it was one of my most emotional amends because I had no idea. When you're in active addiction, you don't think about that. You don't think about the toll you take on the people in your life. You know, my mom lost hours and hours of sleep, maybe even, she says, days and years off her life, waiting to see if I was going to come home. And so once I realized all that turmoil that I had caused, you know, I had to make it right as much as I could. And I don't think I can ever do that, but I can help them, show them by helping the next person, not have to do all the crap that I did.
Oh, that's powerful. It's powerful that, you know, that your parents, and it's interesting, you know, addiction is the very thing that you said, right? If you could have stopped, you would have. And, you know,
Yep.
and if we don't have a familiarity with addiction, we have no idea the power that addiction holds over a person and the illness that's there. And so it makes it really tough. So I love that, you know, I love that your parents are a big part and your family's a big part of your recovery, because those are, you know, if we talk about statistics, those who succeed generally have that in their lives. But, you know, we can also create families, you know, family units without our blood relatives as well. And we, you know, I think the recovery industry is really good at setting people up for that.
Yeah, so building relationships, especially when you get sober young, too, it's so difficult to wrap your mind around how you're going to meet people. Because in high school and even college, the people are put right next to you, right? The people are put in your path, and you spend a lot of time with them, and you develop those relationships. When you're past that point, you know, we're not going to bars to meet people anymore. We're not going to parties to meet people anymore. Even though we can go anywhere if our recovery is strong enough. Don't get me wrong. But for me, having that meaningful relationship meant everything. And I learned that in structured sober living. I learned that I could meet people and have value and not just have transactional relationships, right? And so that's what I'm constantly trying to teach and rub off on my guys here is you can have these meaningful relationships that you've been longing for your whole life. You know, you what you put out, you're going to get back. If you're putting out, you know, a transactional vibe, you're gonna end up with the same people that you started out with. And you know, the relationship piece is so huge. And you know, for me, it was, I mean, I was kind of an introverted guy. I also used kind of drugs and alcohol to be okay in those social environments. And being able to learn how to build and structure healthy relationships and around me has been, you know, great. And I think recovery can give you that if you stick with it long enough.
For sure. Talk about your relationship and how you met your wife, right? Because how early in recovery were you? And the one thing that we always talk about is don't get into a relationship early in recovery, right? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I could kind of speak on that in two ways, right? So I had a relationship really early on in recovery that everybody told me not to do. It didn't end well. I was able to stay sober. I moved to kind of St. Louis to get away from some of that. But I met my wife after I was about 4 years sober. And at the time, I was having difficulty meeting people. You know, the Tinder thing, the people my age, I was like in my mid-20s at the time, it just didn't do what I wanted it to do. I wanted something meaningful. I wanted something that was going to last. And everybody wanted to go party, and obviously that wasn't my thing. And, you know, it's kind of an act of God. I was in a biology class, and it was one of those community college classes, and I was ready to quit school again because I just couldn't get it. That was the same exact semester I talked about earlier where I took the social work class. And I met her one day, and, you know, I told myself that I was going to be open and honest because some people I just didn't tell them that I was sober. I just refused to drink in certain situations. And I was like, with her, I'm going to be honest. You know, because I liked her. You know, she was in my lab group and we were hanging out a lot. And she was a little younger than me, but at the time she seemed extremely mature. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to try. So I was like, I'm in recovery. I'm a recovering addict and alcoholic. And is this something that you can deal with? If it is, then I would love to kind of explore this some more. And she was like, oh, cool. And she just kind of kept talking about whatever else. It didn't matter to her. The biggest anxiety that I had was telling someone this secret, you know, this part of me. And she just shrugged it off like it was nothing. She was like, okay, cool. You know, and she never ever drank. She never used anything. And, you know, it was just her choice. She was around it plenty. She could have, just not something she ever wanted to do, which may be something that I'll never understand. But it's extremely, I would say, one part luck and one part of blessing to have her, because she showed me that, you know, I could accomplish things. And, you know, she was definitely a huge part in helping me figure out how I learned, and then I could be successful. A driving force in starting Learn to Live Recovery, which was a risk too, because, you know, I furloughed from my job, and, you know, there's no money coming in. It's going to take months to build and to get everything that I need in place. And she's just been extremely supportive in my recovery and building this dream. And, you know, the relationship thing in early recovery is not so good, but if your recovery is strong enough to where you can find the meaningful one later, it is, you know, I think just so extremely powerful and a blessing. Something I never thought I'd have, to be honest.
So do you think that she was understanding and accepting, or do you think She was just naive to what you had been through.
I think at the time when we were having the conversation, she was just like, because at the time, you know, I was pretty put together and I had several years. I don't think she really knew what I had been through with the process.
Yeah.
But she was patient enough to watch and listen. And once she learned, she didn't run from it, which I appreciate. And at the time, she had a horrible, horrible view of addiction too, which I know now, but I didn't know then. You know, she had some family members that had some substance use issues and didn't leave it very well and didn't find recovery. So just thankful that she kept an open mind, and now she's an advocate for these people and for this stuff.
Yeah, that's cool.
You mentioned getting lupus based on some medication that you're taking, and to my knowledge, lupus doesn't go away. What's that look like in your life today, and how do you manage that? Because that could be a trigger to use.
Yeah, so I'm lucky enough that the one that I had went away for the most part. So I was on this hydroxychloroquine, which is, funny enough, one of those early medications that people thought could treat COVID. But it's this old malaria medication or whatever, and it works very slowly. And I would say it took probably about 6 or 7 years before I felt well enough to not have to take like naproxen every day or something like that. But now I'm pretty active again. You know, for me at the time it was horrible, and you know I had long lasting effects, and I probably still will just because of what my joints were put through. But I'm extremely active now, and I take taking care of my body pretty seriously, and I'm more or less thankful that I can do that now because I wasn't able to do it before, which has been great for me as well.
Very cool. Very cool. I mean, I only know people that, they have the autoimmune portions of lupus, but I've never heard anybody that, that got it from taking a medication. So very interesting.
Yeah, it's very rare. And I think I actually met another person who got it from the same medication. It was an acne medication. I don't know if they still prescribe it or not. But it was, I guess, a pattern because younger people were getting it. And I don't know, like I said, I don't know if it's still a thing or not, but I can tell you that I do not wish that pain on anyone.
That was a huge life changer for you, especially being so active in sports and all of that. So I can imagine that was really tough. And then nobody likes to be in pain every day.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for me, I just kind of always felt like, and at the time it was mostly a mindset. I didn't realize this. I totally changed mindsets later on in recovery, but I just kind of felt like everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And for me, it was such a blessing later in life. I'm thankful for it because I could have still been battling this disease even now if I lived this long. It got so bad so quick that I had to do something or I wouldn't be here. It was that simple. And so I'm thankful that I had it. I'm thankful that I crashed a couple cars and did all these things happened to me because without that, I wouldn't be here.
I'm wondering about, you talk about your recovery and you talk about, being grateful, which to me, when you can be grateful shows that you really have done your work. Because, I still hear people sometimes play that victim role and not take responsibility for their lives. And so I hear that in your story, which is really powerful. I'm wondering, often spirituality plays a role for people and it looks different. What does it look like for you?
Yeah, so like most people, I was introduced to kind of religion at an early age. My parents were pretty religious, involved in the church, non-denominational Christian kind of churches. And I was even involved for quite a bit until like my mid-teens when I started to really get more into drugs and alcohol. And then all the wreckage happens and you're like, man, I hate, like, how could God let this happen? And, you have so much issue with that, when I went to treatment, I had nothing, no spiritual aspect, no attachment to religion. I refused it. I was against it. Funny enough, my sponsor at the time, when I was in the Phase 4 program, he was like, okay, I'll sponsor you, but you got to go with me to these CR meetings on Thursday nights. CR is Celebrate Recovery, if you're not familiar. It's a faith-based 12-step program, and so I was reintroduced to this. And it was a time when I needed it because, like I said, I'm at the crossroads. I have 5 months at the time, actually probably 4 months at the time, so I can, bullshit my way back to go home, or I can keep kind of this going and see what happens. And that's what I decided to do. I went to the meetings. I sat quietly for a while, and I kind of became kind of depressed. And, I was like telling my sponsor about it and telling other people about it. And they were like, well, the spiritual aspect of, the 12-step program is imperative. And, I never really got past that step. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to try to make a God of my understanding, like it says, and I'm going to give this a go. And I ended up finding my way back to, that God of my childhood. And, it took me creating the God of my understanding to be comfortable enough to go to that. And so, that God of my understanding led me back to that God of my childhood. And ever since then, spirituality has been huge for me. I spend a quiet time every day listening. The book talks about two-way prayer. And a lot of people lose that, right? We talk to God a lot. We pray, foxhole prayers, we do a lot of talking. You have to listen to God too. And that's what quiet time and meditation gives you. And so for me now, like I said, it's part of the structure of my life that I began building then, that I still do now. It's a part of my maintenance. It allows me to take away all of those negative thoughts, feelings that would bring me back to a drink. The spiritual aspect is huge for me. And a lot of times in my line of work, a lot of these guys come in here and they feel the same exact way I did those first few months. Like, look at all the stuff that's happened to me, all the horrible, horrible things. How could God let this happen? And we can't, pull the Bible out and bang it on the table. We can't do that. We allow them to find it for themselves. And once they do, those are the ones, I think, that get that lasting recovery when they have that support. I definitely needed it. And, I've seen it work in so many people's lives.
It's pretty powerful. And I don't know, I don't know too many people. I'm sure there's many that are in recovery that maybe haven't latched onto that, but it seems as though spirituality on whatever level somebody grabs hold of that is really important. So I love to kind of touch on that. So it sounds like, Matt, in your future is more learn to live recovery and growing that business and helping people. And it sounds like a new baby's in the future for you as well, right? That sounds pretty cool. That's fun to be a new time parent.
Yeah. So, I'll just speak on the parent thing. I never thought that I could find a partner that would put up with me or all the wreckage of my past or whatever. And I found one. And, the other thing was I never realized how much I wanted to be a father, because I had always kind of put it in my head that I didn't think that I was capable of it. And, got married in July of last year. I'm about to come up on my year anniversary. COVID wedding, small. We found out in February that we were pregnant. We were trying. I just can't wait. I actually have an appointment tomorrow. I get to hear the baby's heartbeat, and just great.
Oh,
the blessings that Learn to Live recovery or recovery in general can give you. But, to speak on the Learn to Live recovery piece, like I said, I started this, it was a dream. My resident coordinator, his name's David O'Neill. He's been sober 13 years, and I was his intern at that treatment center, right? And I told him about a year or so after I'd been there, I was like, man, I'm gonna create this structured sober living. And he tells people he thought I was crazy. I was, I guess in my mid-20s at the time, and, not everyone does the things they say they're going to do. And a few years later, I asked him to come work for me. And so he works with me. And Learn to Live Recovery just kind of, I find myself just following kind of this path, and things are kind of put in front of me, and I just kind of accept them and go. And I could have gotten another job, been a clinician, and lived a pretty fulfilling life. But I didn't do that. And, coming to the small town of Herman even, it was like, how am I going to find people to do yoga and meditation, and how am I going to find these pieces of this program? And people found me. They were here. They were like, man, the first person that came asking for guidance about something they wanted to do, and turns out they do equine therapy. So I have that. And then somebody called me one day and was like, hey man, I love that what you guys are doing here. I have, a bed and breakfast, and if anybody's parents want to come visit them, just let me know. They can stay here, give you a good rate. She said, I also do meditation. She does singing bowls. She's actually downstairs right now doing it. And then, yoga too, same exact thing. And we just started this live edge woodworking piece. Same thing. They're all here. And it was all kind of put in our path. And, so the program is growing in my eyes. The business side of it is new to me. I'm a clinician. I love to work with the guys, no matter how big we get or whatever we do. I will always want to work with the guys because that's what I love to do. But, it's just a powerful thing to get up every day and be able to do what you love.
That's incredible, and I love listening. I can tell you're so passionate about it, and the way you talk about falling into that, and it kind of comes to you, just kind of lends to the fact that you were open, you were willing to follow, what was coming to you, and here you got this incredible, structured sober living as a result of your hard effort and your passion. That's pretty cool.
Very cool. It still shocks me every day. So I got to drive like a little over an hour when I come out here. I'm coming out here like 4 times a week or more. And people are like, man, that's a far commute. Like, you're doing that. It's easy when you're going somewhere that you love. I don't mind the commute. I don't mind the long hours. I get it. I get it now,
It's also different if you're going somewhere pretty like that. Right? Like you're not stuck in the belt route in town, bumper to bumper. But I had a period where I had like an hour and a half commute every day, and then each way. And then as soon as it stopped, I immediately missed it. Because if you're smart about that commute, and you're listening to podcasts, or if you're doing some type of mindful activity where, you're learning or you're growing or whatever, it really can be. I mean, how many people get 2 hours a day to think for themselves? Like that doesn't happen. So even if you're doing that one way and making calls the other way or whatever, pretty powerful time if you're smart about it.
It is, and just like you said, it's my time where I can kind of process things. I like to read a lot of self-help books. I listen to a lot of podcasts. And I choose to use it as kind of a way to kind of support myself in transition between work and home. But like you said, I had like a 45-minute commute to my first college here in St. Louis. And, I liked it. I enjoyed it. And now I just use it as much as I can, to support, my own recovery and self-help process, which is never ending.
Very cool. And I love the way we can turn anything that may seem to somebody negative and find a positive piece for that. Because even a long commute, I would agree. I love, it's like education on wheels. You can learn while you're going down the road, right? You can have that quiet time, whatever it is, and you can structure that and have meaningful time there too. So very powerful. There's a lot of new stuff coming up in your life and things that you're generating, Matt. So I absolutely enjoyed your story, enjoyed the recovery and your dedication to that. And still, you're in recovery, right? You're gonna do those dailies, and you're gonna make sure that you take care of yourself, and so that you can share with others what you have, what you've learned. So pretty powerful. I appreciate you sharing with us today. Thank you.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.